And now, KELA's Let's Talk About It. Discussions on a variety of topics of interest to Southwest Washington area listeners. Write down the new listener call-in number and keep it handy. 330-5352. That's 330-5352. It translates into 330-KELA. You're invited to join in with your calls now at 330-KELA. Views expressed on the show are those of the host, guest, and callers, and are not necessarily those of the station, its management, or its advertisers. And now, let's talk about it.
Good morning. How are you today? It's November 28th, and thank you again for tuning in to the Let's Talk About It show on AM 1470 and live streaming KELAAM.com. I'm your host, Peter Abbarno, and the number to call in to join our conversation, 360-330-5352. My special guest, my co-host this morning in studio to talk about homelessness and her recent article in the Chronicle documenting her night at the Lewis County Severe Weather Shelter is Brittany Voie. Brittany, thanks for coming in today.
Thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here. This is exciting.
I know when I saw your post, it was kind of funny because you said, that KELA shared a Chronicle article. You never thought you would ever live to see that.
Nope.
Right?
I didn't.
And it's kind of a new thing because, with the KELA and KMNT really partnering with the Chronicle on a lot of different stories and media. It's kind of a new world for, I think, both radio and for print.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, as a media professional myself who works here in the community, I mean, seeing radio and newspaper and all of kind of that media synergy is really exciting, and it really benefits the community in just tremendous ways.
Well, and especially someone like you write a lot of great articles and a lot of controversial articles.
Yes,
throughout.
That's the job.
You're like one of the most read columnists, I think, at the Chronicle, and partly because you pick topics that aren't always comfortable.
Sure.
And they're not always popular, but they tell a different story.
Sure.
So how do you, and maybe not just specifically this article, but how do you come up with your article ideas?
I've been really, really fortunate as, a writer. The Chronicle has always kind of really embraced me, I feel like. They really give me a lot of freedom and encourage me to pick these topics and to explore these things with the community. I see writing columns as kind of like a 5-10 year conversation with the community. And so to get to do that is a huge honor, and they give me so much latitude to do that. So I really kind of just pick and choose topics. I talk to people on my own social media, and we kind of generate conversation that way. And we just take it to a larger platform, and it's a lot of fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, I'm not necessarily a writer. I mean, lawyers write. I write all day and
Sure.
I read all day, but somebody said I have the gift of gab, so I decided just to sit in front of a mic now. But so you wrote a column in the Chronicle, and it's called "A Night in Someone Else's Bunk: Experience at Cold Weather Shelter Reveals Hard Truth." So how did you come up with this specific idea?
So last year, I mean, I've always kind of followed the issue of homelessness in this community. Last year, when they moved the cold weather shelter to the fairgrounds, I kind of really critically questioned whether or not there was good infrastructure to really provide for all people who needed to utilize that service to get there,
right?
Without having huge difficulties. I mean, at the time, I think Twin Transit, the last bus you could get there was like maybe 6 or 6:30 in the evening, and the shelter didn't open till 7. And so I just had some logistical questions. Plus, if you're coming from Chehalis, there's really no clear sidewalk path. You're kind of on the side of the road. And I had been really critical of that. And then as I kind of thought about that after I wrote it and kind of reflected, I felt bad because, here's this volunteer organization that's trying to do these really great things in the community, multiple denominations of churches coming together, really incredible. And I just didn't feel like I really did it justice. And so I felt like I needed to do that walk, and I needed to put my money where my mouth was, and give the shelter an opportunity to kind of see the other side for the readers. So
no, and I think that self-reflection is a good idea, because a lot of times we come out with certain opinions or certain statements, and then we reflect on them and say, maybe I need to delve a little bit more into it. So that and especially an issue like homelessness, which is so multifaceted that you can't necessarily pinpoint it in one column.
Right.
Right. So, hey, we're going to take some calls. If you're just tuning into the Let's Talk About It show on AM 1470 and KELAAM.com, my special guest this morning is Brittany Voie. Brittany wrote a column in the Chronicle recently about the Lewis County Severe Weather Shelter and homelessness. And so we're talking to her to kind of expand on that and figure out how she came up with the idea and what she learned from it. So we'll take some calls. Good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Peter. I'm so glad Brittany is there. I'm so glad that she takes the initiative to look at things. One thing I never knew, that HUD has regulations and rules of what we can have in our homes, not in our homes, but in our building when it comes to Christmas. Apparently, Jesus has been evicted. We cannot show anything, not Mother Mary and Joseph and child. We cannot have on our Christmas tree any balls that look like Jesus could be talked about. I did not know that is what HUD does, but my daughter went on Google and found HUD's rules for decorations for Christmas. Honestly, in this building, which I've lived in for 23 years, and it has never been this way, we should not be saying Merry Christmas. It should be Happy Holidays. We should do all of these things because we don't want to offend others. And I said last night, I'm offended. Yeah. I'm offended that we call it Christmas, and then we want to shove the Blessed Virgin and everybody out. It makes me very angry, and I wish Brittany would take a look into it with HUD because the rules for each state is different.
Yeah. Well, and then that's another topic that she could explore. But you know what? If you call back to the station and leave your name and your address, you know what I'll do? I'll send you my Christmas card that says Merry Christmas on it from my family. Because I don't say Happy Holidays, I say Merry Christmas. So.
Okay, Peter.
Hey, thank you very much.
I'm so serious about this. It has brought a great deal of angst into our community of 40 people because this is the first year this has happened. Usually we've had Bethel and other churches sing throughout our halls Christmas carols, and we understand now we are limited to Frosty the Snowman and Jingle Bell.
And Rudolph.
That's really interesting.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm offended. I'm offended by that, as I think most people in this building are. And it's not our director's fault. Yeah. She's following HUD rules.
Well, I appreciate your call. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I imagine with your story, I mean, because you pick some topics that are often controversial or and maybe not just controversial, but they're interesting and they're hard-hitting. I mean, I know you did the one about the cancer cells down in South County, too. You get pitched a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
I mean, how often? I mean, because I try to pitch you almost daily.
Daily. I'll be in a workout class and have people recognize me and say, hey, have you heard about this? And sometimes I have to be really careful too because I mean I am a columnist, but we still have a newsroom full of people at the Chronicle.
Right.
I'm not necessarily an employee there anymore, and there are reporters there that work beats, and so I kind of have to relay information sometimes, like, oh well, that might be the person that covers Napa Vine City Council. Right. You might want to talk to that reporter. So there's kind of some give and take there, I think.
Yeah. So you used to work for the Chronicle. Mm-hmm. Now is it freelance or you just volunteer this stuff? I mean, they pay you for it?
It's essentially freelance. Yeah. They when I left the Chronicle last year to take another full-time job, they graciously offered me the opportunity to continue writing, just kind of like on a contract basis. I invoice them for the articles that I write. Just to be totally transparent, it's $50 a column. Okay. Is what I get paid.
So this one was about what, 2,800 words?
Yeah.
So we're talking pennies on the word.
Yeah, I mean, I do it because I like it and because I enjoy the conversation with the community. Yeah. It's something that's really fun for me. I think it's unique. I have a lot of pride from it. So.
Yeah. And you have to write about something you have a passion about and an interest about.
Sure.
And most of your columns, I mean, I think people can distill from your column, whether they agree with you or not, that you have a true interest in it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just a boring column.
Sure. My favorite term that anybody's ever described me as is like my editor, Brian Mitke at the time. He's like, I really like that you're an intellectually honest writer, and I had to really kind of think about that because it wasn't that he was saying I was so smart. It was that I like to break it down completely. I like to look at the nuts and bolts of what's really happening. I think that gets lost sometimes in everyday conversation.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's good. And hey, if you're just tuning in to KELA AM 1470 and the Let's Talk About It show, my co-host today is Brittany Voie with the Chronicle. Not really with the Chronicle, but she wrote an article for the Chronicle entitled "A Night in Someone Else's Bunk: Experience at Cold Weather Shelter Reveals Hard Truths," and it's drawn a lot of opinions, both complimentary and some kind of critical, and we're going to explore some of those, and we're going to take some calls through this because I think it's important for you to be able to kind of say, because you can, I'm sure when you write columns, you're also critical of yourself.
Yes. Yeah, there's probably no more anyone out there more critical of me than me. Yeah. And I always think people's reactions to the columns are so interesting, just from an observational standpoint. So I think that's great when people share very raw reactions with me.
Yeah, that's exactly why I don't re-listen to any of my shows. I can't listen to my voice. Good morning. Welcome to the Let's Talk About It show. You're on the air.
Yeah, morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this homeless situation, and it comes down to finances, okay? You're dealing with alcoholism, drug addiction, and mental illness, right, from the get-go, okay? And then if they're lucky, I don't know if you say lucky or whatever, the government decides to give them $700 a month, okay? Do you know of any place that you can rent for $700 a month?
I don't personally, and
I do.
That. Oh, do you?
Rock Street Apartments.
Ooh.
When I first moved here, I lived in the Rock Street Apartments. It was $500 for a 1-bedroom, and it included all utilities.
Is it still, though?
How long ago?
Oh, 2010? So it wasn't that long ago.
Well, I think it's probably changed.
Sorry, Peter.
Maybe.
But anyway, that's where I see a lot of the problem is what landlord would give up an apartment or a place to stay for $200 a month?
Yeah. No.
So
I know. I hear you. In security deposit, and a lot of times landlords are afraid that they're not going to get paid back for damages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, and that's the reason why a lot of them are out there sleeping underneath the bush or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I had. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I mean, what were some of when you went into this?
Mm-hmm.
What were some of your preconceived maybe notions or prejudices that you had that may have changed?
Oh gosh.
I know that was a long compound question.
No, I'm deciding how vulnerable I want to be with your audience. I believe in authenticity, so I'm
go vulnerable.
As I set this what I was doing up at the shelter with the shelter director, Josh Gehring.
Love Josh.
Beforehand,
Pastor Josh, he's
awesome
great.
Awesome guy. And he was so gracious, and one of the pointers he gave me is he kind of did want me to be incognito while I was there, but he also specifically requested that I try to look dress down a little bit. I don't want to say look homeless because I don't like that term, but that's essentially what he was telling me to do. And so I caught myself kind of thinking, planning, okay, how do I look homeless? And then I was like, well, I realized how my impression, I see homeless people as often very dirty.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't really catch me in that moment, noticing that was kind of a preconceived notion that I had. But then when I got to the shelter, of course there is that element at the shelter.
Right.
But, there were people there that had brand new clothes on, brand new Carhartts, brand new shirts. And that was when one of the shelter volunteers kind of said, because I had told her who I was and she was kind of giving me the rundown, there are people in the homeless shelter that live in their cars and they have a job, but just like the gentleman caller that just called in, they can't find housing for the amount of money that they make. It's, there's a 4% housing vacancy in Lewis County right now, which means that if every agency came together and was able to help every person who needed shelter, we wouldn't have enough here in Lewis County to fill that need.
Right.
I mean, that's compounding just kind of that financial piece.
Right. And those vacancy rates being so low, one of the biggest problems is that it then drives the cost up. And that unless we are able to knock down some of the permitting process and start building again.
Right. And make it attractive to build. I don't know if somebody made the comment to me that one of the things we're seeing here is it's not as attractive to build that type of housing here in Lewis County as it is in Thurston County, because you can get more money for it. You can charge higher rent, lower cost of living here. So it's so complex. But
I always say, talk to people, say, even if you were to come in and build middle-class housing, you're going to find middle-class folks moving out of maybe lower housing into those, and that opens it up. Yeah. Because that's the biggest problem. You have people who can afford a $300,000 a house. They are buying a $150,000 house because they just can't find a house that suits them.
Right. So. Well, and then you have the issue too, where you have couples who get together and do an apartment or a home, and then they split. There's a lot of people in the shelter who, again, have jobs, have money, but they've lost a relationship that they're in, so they've lost their housing, and again, they're unable to find something they can afford on their own, and it really is people in crisis.
Yeah. You're listening to Let's Talk About It AM 1470 and live streaming KELAAM.com. My special guest this morning, Brittany Voie, and we're talking a little bit about her experiences at the severe weather shelter. If you have a question, comment, or opinion, give us a call here, 360-330-5352. Good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
They were talking about the cost of a rental. You have to take into consideration that the majority of landlords in Lewis County require you to make a minimum of 2.5, most of them 3 times the income of the rent. So if you're going to rent an apartment, if you can find one for $700, you have to make $2,100 a month. And that people are, like, as Brittany was saying, it's very difficult for people who have a 2-income home and then one of the incomes goes away, or maybe if you have an eviction on your record because that happened to you, then you're sort of not able to find another rental. It's very difficult.
Well, and the other thing you add in is security deposit, first or last month's rent. So you need to have money in the bank too.
Yeah, it can cost you that much to move in. I mean, and if you had that kind of money, you'd have probably been already able to pay your rent at the place you were at. And it's very difficult. The vacancy rate is very small. And so that landlords are able to choose the very, very best candidates. I have a friend who's a landlord, and he had a house in Chehalis, and they were bidding up the price of his rental house in Chehalis. And they bid it up to like $500 more a month than he was asking for it.
Wow.
So, because of the competition for a decent rental. So.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Good call. Thank you. I mean, vacancy. I mean, it's all about inventory at this point, and the question always comes down to how do we increase inventory, because that's going to then readjust some of those prices.
It's a complex question.
Yeah, and it comes down to look, I'm a city councilor. It comes down to municipalities, making it more attractive, policies, making it more attractive for a developer to come in and say, look, I'm going to put this up. And it's going to have that kind of, I always use this, and some people take offense with the trickle-down effect, but it really does.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit more about some of these, preconceived notions and prejudices. I mean, I've always said homelessness isn't one cause, right? Homelessness is the result of something. You're not homeless. You became homeless. So talking to some of the people in the shelter, talking to even some of the workers, what were some of the reasons that some of these folks were actually in the shelter, aside from, the breakups and some of these other things?
Job changes cause a lot of stress on people, especially if you have underlying medical conditions and you can't carry over that medical coverage, and then you're in between your medical coverage and you become so much in debt that it can snowball so quickly. Like, you don't realize, United Way talks about their Alice mission and how many people are so close, just one family disaster away, just one emergency away from not being able to pay their mortgage, not being able to pay their rent. So I think of homeless people as, you think homeless and you think people who wander the street, and you think people who are, but a lot of these people are working and are doing things and are trying to pick up jobs, and it is not enough and at enough of a rate that it keeps up with what's piling up on top of them.
Right, and when you worked, I mean, I volunteered in the severe weather shelter before. When people came in, you can almost identify. There were people who you can tell had mental illnesses, and you can tell there's people who had drug addiction. But you can also tell the folks who are really trying that this is more of a stopgap than a lifestyle. But there is that preconceived notion that the homeless people are lazy and that they don't want to work and they want to adopt this lifestyle. Is that something that you found, or did you find it pervasive, or didn't you find it at all?
You know, I mean, I talked about this a little bit on my Facebook page last week because it's a comment I've heard. You know, I've walked around and talked with nonprofits now for a few years, kind of as a journalist and a writer, and I very rarely do I ever encounter a homeless person that I think, wow, this person just doesn't care, just lazy, just mooch off the system. I generally walk away after hearing their stories feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't, I feel tapped out in my lifestyle as a mom and my jobs and career, you know, all that, and I can't imagine the energy that some of these people have to put into just surviving their daily lives. You know, for instance, one of the women that I was bunked with that night, I wrote about her in the article. She's the woman I think I mentioned in her 40s. I believe that she still is a heroin addict. You know, and she kind of admitted as much, I think, kind of in a veiled way. But hearing her story, it's kind of heartbreaking. The shelter hadn't been open for 3 nights leading up to that Friday that I stayed there. And so for 3 nights, she didn't have any sort of shelter to go to. So she told me for the last 3 nights she hadn't slept because she has to walk around to stay warm. And, you know, this is a woman who, you know, time has been hard on her body. Like, it's hard for her to get around. She had very clear evidence on her feet of just overuse, and like just watching her move about the room, like you could tell it was painful for her. And yet she has to walk all night long to stay warm. Like, I get tired after an hour on the treadmill and I'm like, I tap out.
Right.
And that to me is just so incredible. And how someone could perceive that as lazy. I mean, I think it's survival effort at that point.
But how do you address the kind of the argument that, are we just enabling? Are we enabling? I mean, should we be delivering services? Should part of the agreement be, if you want shelter services, that you have to be clean? I mean, those are some of the arguments that a lot of people use.
I think that's a really difficult question, I guess I should say, first of all.
That's why I asked it.
I know. And you've known me for probably, what, a decade now?
Yeah.
So I know. You're trying to put the screws to me a little bit. I think I kind of have a twofold opinion on that, I guess. You know, on the one hand, I completely understand the necessitation for people to be clean and to be sober. And I would like to point out just really quick too, that never once at that shelter while I was there did I ever feel unsafe. Did I ever see something that made me feel unsafe? Like, you know, you get searched for weapons when you check in. They say no drugs, not even marijuana. Like, there's signs. So there was never an instance where I felt like that was happening when I was there. I want to make that totally clear. Bethel does a great job. But, you know, honestly, I'm listening to this lady that I'm talking about, who's walking around in, you know, 40-degree weather for 3 nights in a row without sleep. I hate to say it, but I can really, on some level, kind of appreciate why someone would want to be, like, not completely in their mental faculties to experience that. Not that it makes drug use okay, but I think seeing it through that lens, I feel like, for me, there's a little bit more of an empathy piece for people who are going through that. I think that drug use, a lot of times, at its root is coping and escapism from what people are experiencing. Yeah. And so, yes, I do think that we have to get people to that point where they make the choice that they want to. In fact, the woman in her 30s that was at the shelter that night told me that she was in the shelter because she was worried about her friend, because she suspected that she was still actively doing heroin, and while she wasn't anymore, she wanted to be that person. And she knew she had, you know, other places she could maybe go to sleep, but she was really worried about her friend. Yeah. And I mean, and she also said to me, like, at one point she said, I want to help her, and I know that if I want to get into housing to be with my child that I talked about in the article, that I have to say goodbye to her. But I really worry about where she goes then. Like, if she doesn't make that choice to leave the drugs behind, I have to say goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those stories are really heartbreaking, and really resolution is something that won't come easy.
Yeah, I mean, drug use is hard, and I get that it's a complex issue, but, you know, I think when you really hear the individual stories, it gives you an opportunity to kind of go, okay, well, how do we address these other things so that you're not coping with this? Right. You know, there's got to be some underlying work, I think.
You're listening to Let's Talk About It, AM 1470, KELAAM.com. My special guest, Brittany Voie, who wrote a column called A Night in Someone Else's Bunk is here taking calls and sharing her experience with all of us. And we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with your calls. If you're interested in sharing your opinion, give us a call here at 360-330-5352.
Hi, this is Tanya with Village Concepts of Chehalis, Woodland Village. If you are dreaming of a holiday season filled with warmth, beauty, great food, and holiday cheer without the stress of putting it all together, consider moving to Woodland Village. We have apartments, townhomes, and cottages in a lovely retirement community. Our brand new assisted living and memory care building is slated to open 2019. Woodland Village, where the warmth and beauty of the holiday season is created especially for you. Call Tanya at 360-748-0095 today for more information and a personal tour.
Your News is now available to you. Log on to yournews.com, type in your zip code, and see all of the breaking local, national, and international news all in one place. You can also contribute your organization's news to this online publication, yournews.com. Business owners, you can target your advertising to as many local zip codes as you choose. Yournews.com is an online news source for local as well as national and worldwide news. That's yournews.com, or go to KELAAM.com.
Welcome back to the Let's Talk About It show on KELA AM 1470 and KELAAM.com, where we live stream. My special guest is Brittany Voie here, talking about her column, A Night in Someone Else's Bunk. So, Brittany, you had interactions with folks who were utilizing the shelter, but you also had some experiences with the volunteers. Mm-hmm. And, you know, volunteering for that shelter, I mean, they need a lot of volunteers because there's burnout. I mean, there's overnight shifts there. Yeah. So talk to me about some of the volunteers you met, and maybe you can share who might want to be interested in volunteering and helping out.
Well, first of all, I'll say if you have any sort of heart for volunteering, it's a wonderful thing you can do. I'm going to speak about this, but the most knowledgeable information, Peter, you've been a volunteer. Yep. So it's a 12-hour shift, right? 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Lights out at 10 p.m., lights on at 6 a.m. So you're kind of, as a volunteer, you're there, you're welcoming people when they come in the door, you're kind of taking some really basic information about them. You're making sure that they've got a cup of soup out on the table and coffee. You're making sure that people know that they have these things available to them. You're assigning them a bed for the night. You're writing names on tags for bedding. Sometimes you're seeing repeat people, shelter customers, I guess, if you will, and then other times they're new faces. I was a completely new face for everybody there that night that I came, and they recognize that right off the way. It's very obvious that they're acquainted with their kind of population there. Right. I think one of the things that was kind of most impressed me when I was there specifically, and there was a woman there, and I don't remember her name, so I'm so sorry. She was there Friday night that I was there, and she was the woman who kind of did my intake when I came in. And she was just like, if I could compare her to something, she was like sitting down next to my sweet little grandma and just taking my information, and you could tell, like, she wasn't looking at me, judging me. She was very just genuinely a human connection, like asking me my information. When we came out later that night to kind of hang out in the common space before lights out, she sat there on the couch right next to us and was listening and was talking, and she, heard the woman who was 3 weeks postpartum and had the baby in NICU calling the NICU to check on the baby and was trying to talk with that woman about it. So I think if you're a person that, I think of my grandma too. She's listening. I dropped my kids off this morning. She had the radio out on the coffee table, ready to listen to this. So, but if you're somebody that has an incredible heart for people, that you want to love people, like, these are people who need connection. And I believe that's one of the most basic things that humans need to get on their feet is connection and someone to believe in them. And if you like to be a person that inspires others, this is so great for you. You're not going to have a win with every story. You're not. Like, you can't go into it thinking that. But you can pour your heart into it, you can volunteer, and you can maybe, hopefully, change a couple of lives in the process.
Well, and I think one of the most important things, especially with folks going through mental illness or drug addiction, and in terms of that population, if they're going to get help, they have to go through somebody who they trust.
Yes. And there has to be a touch point for those services.
And so that, and that I think is something that Bethel Church and the Hub City Mission and Pastor Josh Gehring are looking for, people who can make that connection to help these people kind of lift them out of poverty. When they're ready to do it, you need to be there for them.
Absolutely.
So if you're Brittany, thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me. It was awesome.
This was a lot of fun, and it was a great story, and I appreciate your insight. And if you're interested in volunteering or donating, make sure you visit Bethel Church Chehalis, for the Hub City Mission. They have a Facebook page and a website. They would more than welcome your donation or your man hours to help volunteer.
Yeah, and anybody can do it.
All right, up next, Fox News Report, then Rush Limbaugh. Have a great day.